Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today's expert webinar. My name is Aaron Samuel from Spring People. Spring People is India's biggest corporate technology training company. As a part of our webinar series, we have Mr. Surya Prakash Mahapatra, Global Head, Talent Transformation, Wipro. If you have any questions during the session, please type in the question box. At the end of the session, Mr. Surya will answer all your questions. Now, without any further ado, over to Mr. Surya Prakash.
Great. Thank you very much. I would like to thank Spring People for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this webinar and share my experience and some of my ideas with you and engage in a dialogue with you on how can L&D drive continuous learning strategy. The theme for this webinar is 5 steps to an L&D driven continuous learning strategy. Let me begin with a story. There was a young man in a country who wanted to learn music. And he was very fond of music and then wanted to go to the best teacher in his province and learn music from him. He found out the best teacher, went to him and asked him, Guruji, can you teach me music? The Guruji smiled at him, looked at him, smiled and said, yes, why not? I can accept you as a disciple in my music school. The young man said, teacher, tell me how long it's going to take me to learn music from you. The teacher said it's going to take you 6 years. The young man was a little surprised and he said, Guruji, look, I already know something about music. And I don't think in my case it's going to take 6 years. It might take less than 6 years. I think I can learn music fairly quickly, Guruji. The teacher looked at him and then asked him, my dear student, tell me what you know about music. The student, with a lot of pride, explained to the teacher everything he knows about music. And then with a sense of pride and inquisitiveness on his face, he looked at the teacher and asked him, Guruji, now tell me how long this is going to take, or it's going to take for me to learn music. The teacher, with a lot of calmness and composure on his face, told the student, it's going to take 12 years for you to learn music. The young man was furious. He was angry. He was surprised, taken aback, and he looked at the teacher and asked, Guruji, are you a real guru or a fake one? You told me it'll take me 6 years. I have already explained to you all that I know about music and expect it's going to take much lesser than 6 years, but you're saying it's going to take 12 years? The teacher smiled and looked at the young man and then said, son, everything that you know about music is wrong. It's going to take you 6 years to unlearn what you have learned, and it's going to take another 6 years for you to learn music. So 6 years plus 6 years is 12 years. That's what you need to learn music. My dear friends, participants in this webinar, this story has got a very profound message for all of us. This story is about learning, unlearning, and relearning. This story is about continuous learning. This story leaves a profound message with all of us that we should never believe that we have arrived in life, but we should always believe that we are students in the journey of life. Bill Clinton, the former president of the United States of America, when he was addressing a very premier important conference, he made a very important statement. And he said to all the delegates in the conference, Dear friends, all that I have learned in many years of my life is just one thing. And that one thing is there is always more to learn. That's what the potential of every human being. There is always more to learn. And human beings are, no matter what age, what generation, what gender, what group they belong to, the human beings always have the potential to learn more. And today's webinar is all about that. It's about how do we build a continuous learning strategy. What can L&D do to make that happen? Before we talk a little bit more about it, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about what's happening all around us. Let's talk about the characteristics of our times. The times that we live in today, the only thing that's constant is change. We know that only thing that's constant, that can happen, that keeps happening all the time is change. The future is unknown, probably to a large extent cannot be predicted. There are ambiguities, complexities all around us. We are not able to decide what's the right thing to do, to be or not to be, what's going to be the repercussion of my action. There are ambiguities, the complexities all around us. And knowledge is fast becoming obsolete. The knowledge that we acquired yesterday, the knowledge that we acquired in the universities that we studied in, and the knowledge that we use in our job today are very different. The knowledge that we require 10 years from now, or maybe even 5 years from now, does not even exist today. That knowledge is going to evolve over the next 5 years. These are the characteristics of our time. And let's look at the industry and especially the workforce, the people in organizations who are the key components of an organization, the human capital as we call them. There are some interesting emerging workforce trends. These are the trends. By 2020, more than 1/3 of the desired core skill sets of most occupations will be skills that are not yet considered crucial today. This is something I talked about. The skills that are going to be required, which are going to be important, probably do not exist today, or they are not considered important today. There's going to be higher unemployment with unfilled jobs, rising productivity with stagnant wages. Companies probably will increase their revenues, but there'll be more productivity, but they will still give less wages to people. Economic recovery with declining upward mobility. The makeup of the workforce will keep changing. 4 generations will work together. Man and machines will work together at the workplace. In the same workplace, man and machines will collaborate with each other. Men would manage machines and other men, or we don't know whether machines will manage men. Shifting workforce demographies. Workforce will be global, or it's already global today, virtual, mobile, spread across countries and cultures. Organization structures would keep changing. Hierarchical structures in the past would break down. Large corporations would break down. Hierarchical structures would melt away. Self-empowered teams would emerge. Small organizations who are more agile and strong will become suddenly more powerful. We would see the large elephants, who are the large corporations, very slow to move around, and we'll see the small mosquitoes, very small, but very agile and swift. And the mosquito can pierce into the skin of the elephant, and the elephant can't do anything about it. So that's what we would see, large organizations struggling to survive and succeed and thrive. And we'll see that small organizations which are agile and swift and willing to learn, experiment, make mistakes, and keep learning from those mistakes and keep doing course correction would become more successful. These are some of the interesting trends of our time. Let me quickly share with you one example. This example is of about parking your car then and now. So a few years ago, when you and your spouse used to travel together, and if you're driving and if you reach your destination, you would probably need your spouse's help to guide you how to park. Your spouse probably would get down if you are still at the driver's seat, and the spouse would tell you, go to the left, turn right, turn left again. Oh, you're going to hit the pillar, go back and start all over again. That's how the spouse would help you, you, the driver. Now things have changed. How do you park today? Today you have cars which have got cameras with sensor fitted, and there's sensors and camera will exactly tell you precisely how many millicentimeters you are away from the pillar and how can you really park your car precisely, flawlessly, without any challenge, because now the machine has taken over the role of your spouse as a subject matter expert, helping you park the car. So that's the bad news. The role of your spouse as a subject matter expert has gone away. What's the good news, ladies and gentlemen? The good news is your spouse is still there. And the spouse is probably still relevant if he or she prepared to learn something new, something different, because the machine has taken over the role of the subject matter expert when you are driving and trying to park your car. So that's all about the need for continuous learning. That's exactly what Marshall Goldsmith said. What got you here won't take you there. So individuals and organizations will have to acknowledge the fact that where they're today, because of the skills, the knowledge, the competencies they had, they're here today. But those knowledge, skills, competencies will not guarantee that they will be there tomorrow in the leadership position. So this is where I think Jack Welch, the famous management guru and the head of General Electric, at some point in time, told very loudly that organizations that learn faster than competition would stay ahead of the curve. Organizations that do not learn keeping in pace with the competition's ability to learn would lag behind. And a great example is Nokia. I think one of the engineers in Nokia actually invented the first digital camera, but the mental models of the leaders in the organization did not allow them to pursue that vision. They continued to believe that a picture which has the look and feel, the touch and feel, that would remain forever, and digital pictures would never succeed. And they refused to learn. They refused to see the signals. They refused to see the new trends in the industry. They refused to acknowledge what is coming. And that's how they failed miserably. So this is what individuals and organizations need to keep in mind, that they need to understand what's coming. They need to see the emerging trends. They need to see the mistakes they have made and how can they learn from that. They need to see what's changing in this world and how can they connect the dots. That's what Steve Jobs did very well. When the whole world was using mainframe computers, he believed that the computing powers can be in a box. It can be on a desktop. And that's how he invented the Apple computers. And when the best computer organizations or manufacturers were inventing and manufacturing the best laptops in the industry, he already knew that the computing powers of the future would be on our palm, on the mobile, in the mobile phones. And that's how, iPhones originated. So he had this great ability of seeing the trends in the future, what is happening, what is changing, and he had the great ability to connect the dots. So in our organizations, we need more and more leaders, more and more individuals, more and more people who are ready to learn from the mistakes, ready to see what's coming, ready to understand the trends, and start preparing for the future. We need individuals who are ready to learn at all times. How can L&D make a difference? How can L&D make that happen? How can L&D facilitate that? L&D can facilitate that if L&D acknowledges the changing role that it's going to play in future or today. L&D, first of all, has to acknowledge that the traditional approach to training will not work. The traditional approach to learning and development will not work. L&D has to acknowledge that its role is going to evolve or has already started evolving to ensure that it enables an organization to keep learning all the time. So here are three things that are changing in the role of the L&D practitioner. The role of L&D today and tomorrow is going to be continuous generation of meaningful, vibrant, relevant, on-demand content accessible from anywhere. So their role is not just to create dozens and dozens and dozens of classroom delivery material and program. Their role is going to evolve into something or somebody or function which is going to generate continuously meaningful, vibrant, relevant, on-demand content accessible from anywhere. L&D's role is going to build an ecosystem and create a context where people can discover who to collaborate with to develop capabilities. L&D will not have all the capabilities within the function. L&D will not have all the knowledge. The knowledge will be sitting across the organization, in the subject matter experts, in the knowledge champions. L&D has to just build an ecosystem which will help people find the context, which will help people discover who are they going to collaborate with for building, developing their knowledge. Who is the SME that they need to reach out to? Who are the peers that they should work with to ensure that they come together, collaborate, and build new knowledge? L&D's role is going to facilitate interactions and ensure that these become intrinsic to the way organization functions. So L&D has to ensure that people who have the knowledge, they come together, talk to each other. There are interactions. People in organizations do talk to each other. L&D cannot stall that. L&D has to facilitate that. L&D has to ensure that through the right ecosystem, we bring people together, facilitate those interactions, and these interactions become intrinsic to the way the organization functions. It becomes a part of the DNA. Learning and sharing, collaborating to create new knowledge becomes part of the DNA of the organization. This is what L&D has to facilitate. How can L&D make that happen? And when we started the webinar, we talked about 5 steps. We said, today we're going to discuss 5 steps that L&D can use or take to make that happen. The first and foremost is to get leadership commitment. It begins by including learning in the vision statement of the organization. It begins there. If the survival and growth of an organization depends on learning, it has to be part of the vision statement. An organization should openly declare and make a statement that we are going to become a learning organization. We're going to learn from our customers, learn from our experiences, learn from our partners, learn from our suppliers, and we're going to create new possibilities and experiences for our customers and stakeholders and partners. So that's step number one. And L&D has to facilitate that. L&D has to work with the leadership, have a strategic partnership with the leadership, and ensure that there is leadership commitment. There is something which is becoming very popular these days, which is called manager as a teacher. So it begins a learning organization. Stepping stone is when the leadership is committed to learning, when the leadership is committed to drive learning in the organization. And L&D has to ensure that that commitment is obtained. And when the CEO of the organization goes out there and delivers training to people through the medium of story training, sharing experiences, or by reaching out to people and then sharing knowledge, that can be a great example, a great trend setter, which can actually ensure that we move towards building a learning organization. Step two is to build learning habits in people, and that's the most important one. While people understand the relevance of learning, many do not understand, many people really do not get into the groove of learning. They really do not develop learning habits. And because in future, learning is going to be self-directed, it's going to be self-managed, it's important that people develop the habit of learning. If they do not have the habit, then they're never going to learn. And what role L&D can play? Let me share an example. Many of us would have flown an aircraft from one part of the country to another, or from one part of the world to another part. And on several occasions, you may have been seated next to an emergency exit. And when you are next to an emergency exit, the air hostess comes to you and tells you how to operate the emergency exit at the time of an emergency. My dear friends, if I ask you a very simple question, if actually you happen to face an emergency situation, how many of you can really operate the emergency exit? I think my experiences or my conversations with people says that there are very few people who can actually operate an emergency exit. So, and why does that happen? The air hostess comes to you, explains how to operate the emergency exit, and why can't we do that at the time of need? This tells us about a fundamental principle of learning. That principle is people want to learn. People learn only when they want to learn. If they don't want to learn, no matter whatever we do, they will never learn. So how can we really make that happen? How can we make people want to learn? That's the most important thing. That's the most important thing. And if you get the clue of doing that, actually that begins the first step towards building learning habits in people. And that becomes the way how we can actually build learning habits. Now, what's the next step? Help people unlearn. We talked about it when we started. And I shared the story of this young man who went to the musician to learn music. And the musician told him, the teacher told him that you will need 6 years to unlearn and another 6 years to learn music. And the young man was not happy. And that's the scenario in organizations. Our people in organizations come with, I know it all attitude. And the most difficult, learning a new thing is always easy, but unlearning is the most difficult part. That's what happened to Nokia, as we said some time back. The organization, the leadership refused to unlearn and learn something new. Refused to unlearn the mental models, the beliefs, the theories, the concepts, the ideas they had. They refused to unlearn. They refused to accept new learning. Because new learning cannot happen unless and until we unlearn. L&D as an organization has to ensure that we help people unlearn. That's extremely important. Through creation of experiences, interactions, which will help people collectively challenge their collective beliefs and which will help individuals challenge their individual beliefs. And that's possible when we create new experiences for people. So that's step number 3 for L&D, to help people in the organization unlearn. Now let's look at the next one. Step number 4 is about building learning communities. So we need to build communities and organizations. Communities do exist. There are social communities, there are welfare communities, there are different communities. How about creating learning communities? Communities of practice, communities of expert who can come together, help each other, create new knowledge, co-create new body of knowledge, make people and organization enriched with more knowledge, help organizations build their organizational capability. So building communities of practice in organizations, which used to be a great practice in the manufacturing era when we had quality circles, etc. Today, the new industry in the 4th industrial revolution actually can build learning communities. And that's possible when we create the right ecosystem where people can freely, seamlessly, in a non-threatening environment, reach out to each other for new knowledge, share new knowledge, without any fear, without any anxiety, without any stress. L&D has to make that happen. And today, global organizations which are spread across the globe can have virtual communities which are again spread across the globe. That's where L&D plays an important role. Technology, understanding the cultural nuances, understanding the capability of technology will help L&D build the right communities and bring people from across the globe, across different cultures, come together and collaborate on a particular theme, on a particular body of knowledge, and then enable the organization to build its capability, both people capability and organizational capability. The last one, it's not enough to have a great vision statement unless we build a learning culture by building learning habits in people, by creating the right ecosystem where we build communities and enabling people to unlearn. What's also important is to keep reviewing how we are progressing. How is the learning charter progressing? How is our social learning initiatives progressing? And this review is not about number of people who attended training. It's not about how many hours of training that have been conducted. It's not about how many programs that have been delivered. It's all about how many innovations that we have created, how many ideas that have been generated, how many communities have really been formed, how much of new knowledge that has been created, how many customer problems that you have solved by applying new knowledge. That's where the crux of this review has to focus on, revolve around, because that really talks about our progress. So as an L&D practitioner, keep reviewing the learning charter, the continuous learning charter, and make course corrections, make improvements, and keep progressing. So these are the 5 steps that an L&D practitioner or L&D leaders in organizations need to take to drive a continuous learning strategy. What should be our vision for the future? The vision for the future is to move our way progressively from our current state and approach to learning to a dynamic, pragmatic future state of learning. And let's look at this continuum. And on the left, you can see the past or the present state of learning in organizations, how people learn in organizations. And on the right side, you can see how can we evolve and progress to the future. So learning has to evolve from a present demo, practice, feedback approach to gather, reflect, create, test, approach. So typically, present, demo, practice, feedback is a trainer, instructor-driven approach. But in future is about bringing people together, giving them the experience where they can gather new knowledge, reflect on that new knowledge or experience, create new knowledge themselves, and test it out themselves. Let's look at the learning programs that we design. It's more present, demo, practice, feedback based, or it's more oriented towards enabling people to gather, reflect, create, and test. Our learning for the future has to be learner-centric and not content-centric. There is too much of content that's all over the place. It's the learner's needs, the challenges that he or she is facing, the competencies that he needs to build. It has to revolve around the learner. In the traditional approach, learning was all about explaining things. In the future approach, where learning has to be continuous, it's all about helping people discover things. In the past or today, learning is about information. In future, it has to be learning about finding meaning, not about finding information. In the past, learning is about what. Today and tomorrow, it's going to be about how. In the past, learning was about teachers. Tomorrow, learning is about networks, it's about communities, it's about knowledge networks, it's about people coming together, helping each other learn from each other, not necessarily depending just on one teacher to make learning happen in them. Learning today is about receiving meaning. Learning tomorrow is about creating and co-creating meaning. And when new learning is created by the learners themselves, they are the most likely to apply that new knowledge. Learning today is about defined content. Tomorrow it's going to be about dynamic content. Learning today begins with what we know. Tomorrow it's going to start with what they know, what the students know, what the employees know, not about what the trainer knows. Yesterday and today it was about training. Tomorrow it's going to be about learning. Today is about information silos, learning residing within functions, within teams, within groups of people. Tomorrow is going to be about connected information, where information can pass on seamlessly from function teams by the leverage of technology and the right practices, right processes, and the right ecosystem set up in the organization. So that's the vision for the future. This is what L&D has to drive to ensure continuous learning in organization. Gather, reflect, create, and test. Build a learner-centric learning strategy. Help people discover. Help people find meaning. Help people find out the how. Build learning networks in organizations. Help people create meaning, not just receive meaning. Create an ecosystem where people can create content on the go and then pass on to each other. Start with what your people know. Shift from training to learning, and create an ecosystem where information does not exist in silos. It's there all over the place and it's connected. People across groups, functions, teams have access to information seamlessly on demand and find meaning out of it. So L&D, if I had to essentially talk about the vision for the future, in one sentence, it's about stop teaching, start enabling. Because you can't teach everything. You cannot be an expert in every subject. The technology is changing every now and then. When new business models are emerging, new way of doing things are emerging, we can't be a master, an expert in everything. So let's stop teaching. Let's start enabling people to become the master of their learning, create their own learning, become the navigator of the ship, and then come together to create and build a learning organization. So ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Q&A. I can see there's a question from Sri Kumar, and his question is, please explain what is unlearn. Does that mean forgetting the last knowledge or developing attitude to adopt new knowledge? That's a great question. So unlearning is about your mental models, your beliefs, your hypothesis, your ideas about certain things, practices, etc. Unlearning is about challenging all of that. And this does not necessarily mean that you have to give up everything, all the hypotheses that you've built, all the beliefs that you have over the years, but it's all about questioning them and challenging them. And it's about looking at all your beliefs and ideas and concepts and mental models in the context of where we live today, in the organizations, industries, and societies that we live today. What is changing? Thereby, how do I need to recalibrate, modify, change, and adapt some of my thoughts, ideas, and beliefs, and recalibrate them and determine whether do I need to continue to believe what I believe, or do I need to make some changes, adjustments, adapt some new ideas and new learning, and then try them out. That's what unlearning is all about. And that's the most difficult task, as I said some time ago. This is something which requires the ability to acknowledge the fact that I'm not necessarily always right. And the way we have done things in the past is always going to work in future, or what we knew or what we have tried in the past is the only effective way. So it begins with that. It begins with the acknowledgement of the fact that I need to relook at my beliefs and fundamental ideas and thought process and mental models and keep revising them. I think the next question, as I see, Deepika, how to motivate employees to come forward to learn? Well, I think I talked about it. I gave the example of this air hostess coming to any one of us who have been seated next to an emergency exit, and she's so passionately explaining to me how do I operate an emergency exit, but I refuse to learn. So how do I really make people? How do I motivate people to learn? The only time people would learn, as I said, is only when they want to learn. So my job is to make people want to learn. So for me to do that, I need to understand what really makes people want to learn. What is their preferred learning style? Do they learn through games? Do they learn through activities? Do they learn by reading? Do they learn by collaborating? And we'll have to keep in mind that in an organization, there are going to be 4 different generations working together. Possibly, they may have different styles, different preferences. So there is no one style fits all. It's important for us to understand how millennials learn, how people from a particular culture learn, how people from a particular a background, how do they learn? And also, we cannot always generalize that every millennial is technology savvy, or every Gen X or baby boomer is not technologically savvy. That could probably be the wrong, biased approach that we might take, or generalization that we might make. So, Deepika, there's no direct answer to this question. It's all about digging deeper and finding out and understanding how people learn. What is the preferred learning style? What makes them want to learn? And then going back and designing learning programs which will really address this motivation of people. So if millennials of youngsters learn through games because they're hooked onto a smartphone or a tab all the time, and then they're probably very fond of playing games, etc., on the computer or on the smartphone, can some of these elements be brought into your learning content and design? fundamentally making people want to learn is the way forward. Rajesh, I think you have a couple of questions. As I see, your first question is, how do we calculate ROI for the folks who do not contribute to revenue? And how do we calculate the mandatory training hours? Okay, I'm just trying to understand your question. So how do you calculate ROIs for the folks who do not contribute to revenue? So I'm assuming you're talking about people in the support functions who do not directly contribute to revenues. I'm making an assumption. Okay. All right. Okay, so I think in today's world, we do not have any role in the, ideally we should not have a role which do not make the contribution either to the top line or the bottom line in the organization. Yes, there may be functions which do not contribute to the top line, to the revenues, but every role in the organization has to contribute to the bottom line at least. But essentially, what really brings revenue to the organization? It's the products, services that we render or we provide. It's the experiences that we create for our customer. It's the solution that we provide to our customer. So the ROI is all about finding out how each role is contributing to that. So whether it's the role of a trainer or a quality expert or possibly a project manager or whoever who's working on different projects or product development or service portfolio, etc. How is their role either contributing to revenue generation, better CSAT, better quality of the products? Is the role really contributing in bringing significant savings to the organization? Are you really contributing to idea generation process? So we really have to figure out what are the different ways that we can measure contribution to revenue generation or operating margin or profits or customer experience, product development, idea generation, and so on. So revenue is not just the only parameter for ROI measurement. There are different other ways. Every person in the organization can contribute. We need to find out what is the role, what's the linkage of this role with the larger vision of the organization and the mission statement. What is the linkage? How do you really quantify that and then measure what contribution I'm making? Is it a cost saving? Is it a revenue generation? Is it CSAT improvement, NPS improvement, or anything else that can be tangible and quantifiable? I look at the next question. How do we calculate the mandatory training hours? Mandatory training hours are mandatory programs. Some programs are mandatory. Generally, I do not believe that. I believe that majority of programs in organizations should not be mandatory. Programs should be by choice. It should be linked to people's aspiration, career progression. Programs should be designed in a manner so that people aspire and show interest in going through these programs. The moment you make it a mandate, it becomes a tick box. But having said that, there is probably a need in organizations to develop certain programs, whether it is a standard of business conduct, a program around how to prevent harassment in organization, etc., are all about the policies and the procedures and the value system and the standards and ethics of the organization, which mandatorily needed to be passed on to every employee. So it's important because, well, if the cops are not there, many people don't wear the helmets. And that's why the cops are standing there to slap a penalty if they find somebody flouting the law. So, so there are some programs which need to be mandated but I believe there should not be more than 5 to 10% of all the programs that we try to drive in an organization. And such programs need to be definitely mandated, and the progress need to be tracked. People who are not completing them in time, we need to go back to them and tell them that you need to complete those programs. I don't know if you have time to pick up all the questions. Let me kind of try and look at some more questions. What strategies do you suggest to implement continuous learning among leadership team? That's a great question, because oftentimes the leaders believe that they know it all. They don't have to learn everything because they've done it. They're successful leaders. They prove their leadership quality time and again in many places. So that's where I think fundamentally the problem is. And when there's a problem like that, it cascades down the organization. So it's important to promote continuous learning among leadership team. The start point would be to get the CEO on your side. The CEO of the organization has to believe that he or she has to learn. He or she has to keep challenging his or her beliefs and mental models and thought process. And if the topmost leader in the organization believes in that, then it becomes easier for other, and he leads by example by by setting the right example, then other leaders will follow. The other strategy to do that would be kind of bringing people together, leaders together, and break down the silos. In large organizations, often it is seen senior leaders work in silos that do not collaborate with each other. So by building those collaborative platforms, by creating those projects where a leader has to collaborate with another leader to make this program successful, will give an opportunity to the leader and exposure to other perspectives. The third strategy is reverse mentoring, which is very effectively used by some organizations. And they have adopted this policy as a best practice. So some organizations actually identify millennials as mentors to the CEO and the CXOs and the senior leaders in organization. They challenge the fundamental belief that you know it all. They said that the new generation is more agile, more technology savvy, they're more social media savvy. They bring in fresh new ideas. Why don't you have a millennial as your mentor? So reverse mentoring is being used as a good strategy in organization to ensure or implement continuous learning among leadership teams. Trying to look at a couple of more questions. What is the ideal way of transitioning from set content to dynamic content without losing on your own credibility, as you may come across some difficult questions, which we as facilitators may not be able to answer immediately? So first of all, we'll have to drive a mindset that we are transitioning to an organization which is going to become agile, which is going to experiment, try, let people make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. It has to be driven top down. And the L&D leader in the organization has to partner with the CEO and the leadership team to make that happen. And the leaders below them will have to make that happen in their respective functions and organizations. So moving away from a defined content to a dynamic content, it can be a phased approach. You do not have to move, you do not have to sunset or grandfather all your defined set content. They can still remain. They can still continue to add value. But you need to create those practices, policies, and systems. As I talked about communities of practice, communities of practice can be a good tool to create dynamic content. Content can be created on the go. Enterprise social media. Different organizations either have their own proprietary social media tool or they use a third-party one. And enterprise social media can be a useful tool to bring people and collaborate, write blogs, create a video, contribute to ideas. And that should be knowledge champions who should actually take this distributed content and find ways and means to kind of consolidate that into content which is structured and which can be accessible by people across the organization. So while you continue to have defined content, build an ecosystem where people come together, collaborate, and co-create content dynamically, which then can be structured and formalized into new body of content and knowledge and be available for access on demand by people across the organization. How are organizations leveraging different technologies to cater to different learner styles and keeping them engaged? There are a lot of them. There are a lot of them today. But before I kind of talk about some of them, let me tell you one thing, that your technology is not your objective. Technology is only a tool. It's the choice of the technology which does not direct or drive your solution. It is your purpose which drives your solution. So I think this is an anecdote. When Americans went to the space, they realized that the pen that they carry does not write because of low pressure. And they decided to invent a pen which will write in the space. They spent millions of dollars in research to produce a pen which could write in the space. And they actually did that. They could invent a pen which could write in the space. You know what the Russians did when they went to the space? They used a pencil. So it's not about which technology. It's about what is my purpose. If my purpose is to write in the space, how can I do that? What can help me to do that? Can a pencil do that for me? Then why not? So when I was speaking to a group of audience in an HR conference in Amsterdam a few years ago, a lady stood up and then asked me, Surya, you come from a large organization. You have the money, the investment to invest in technologies. I come from a medium-sized organization. We don't have the money to invest in technologies. I said, what do you want to do? She said, I want to create a collaborative platform where people can collaborate to learn. I said, do you have a SharePoint? Do you use SharePoint? Do you use shared folders in organizations? Do your people in your organizations carry smartphones? Can you encourage them to create videos and upload there? Can you create a blog site and ask people to write blogs? So if you really want to get people to collaborate, there are resources available all around you. You really don't have to invest in sophisticated technologies to drive collaboration. You can do that in simple ways. But having said that, organizations today are leveraging many technologies: mobile technology, mobility, social media, videos, and artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality. There are different technologies what organizations are using today to drive collaboration and to drive a culture and strategy of continuous learning. You just have to find out what is your purpose, what you want to do, and then choose the right technology from the gamut of technologies which are available, and then pick the right one and then use them. I'm just trying to see if there's some more questions I can see. Oh, actually, I don't see any question now. Maybe they've all moved to the other section. What is the greatest barrier you have seen in your experience in creating a learning organization? Is people, a learner that shy away from learning, or is it leadership? Well, there are quite a few of them. I think it's the leadership, and I think to me the biggest barrier is L&D itself. L&D practitioners who believe that the ways they have been training, driving learning in the organization all these years are the best ways to drive learning, even going forward. They are the biggest barrier to learning. So L&D has to come out of that mindset. L&D, I wrote an article a few months ago. I said, If you are the CLO of an organization, can you run your function as a startup? Are you prepared to take risks, experiment, bring in new ideas, bring in new technologies, be prepared to invent and innovate? Then you can probably set up the right L&D function. The other barrier is the leadership, which I will not say it happens everywhere, but any organization where the leadership believes that learning is just a support function, it's not part of our critical strategy, they actually become a greatest barrier for learning in the organization. And I would say the attitude, the mindset, the mental blocks in people, and not adapting, not driving a pull-based learning culture in the organization, not creating content which is dynamic, which is interesting, which is relevant, which is meaningful, potentially can become barriers to learning in organizations. Let me see if there is more. Monish Dua says, my question is pending. I'm trying to figure out where your question is. Maybe if you can type it again, I'm not able to trace it out. I think I've discovered it. Can you elaborate more on when they want to learn? What approach can act first? Okay, so it's important is to create inquisitiveness in people to learn. And that happens, and then the approach that can act first is to understand quickly which learner group that you are trying to address, what are their motivation behind learning. The motivation behind learning, would they learn phenomenally well if you just let them be on their own and create their own learning, then make that happen, instead of putting them through regimented, structured, formal learning programs. If you believe that learning, there are people who can learn through a competitive environment, a gamified environment, try and create that environment. So if you ask me if there is one approach which will make people want to learn, no, there is no one approach. It varies from organization to organization, country to country, culture to culture, gender, age group, cultural background, whole lot of things. So as an L&D practitioner, you will have to figure out what makes it happen and accordingly, act accordingly. Great. I think that brings us to the end of most of the questions. And I would like to thank People Spring once again for putting together this wonderful platform.
Mr. Surya, sorry for interrupting. There is a question from Mr. Prabal. He couldn't put it on Q&A. I just put it on chat for you.
Okay, let me just look at it.
Yeah.
Oh, can you quickly read it out for me?
Yeah, sure. He says, what are the tested tools to enumerate productivity for futuristic L&D sessions?
Okay, so when you talk about productivity, there are different parameters. So you look at your efficiency, how quickly you churn out your content to meet the dynamic requirement of new emerging business needs and competency needs thereby. So how quickly you can really churn out content, how quickly you can deliver training, how quickly you can bring people up to speed. So there are different ways that can be done. One is technology leverage. Technology is a great tool to create content quickly. You can churn out content quickly, thereby improve the productivity in terms of rolling out modules quicker. The traditional approach of bringing a set of instruction designers together and creating a whole lot of content following different methodologies. I'm not going to challenge any one of them, but some of our methodologies are not really geared to create content fast and in real time. We need to have the ability to create content in real time, disseminate content in real time, and in fairly good amount of time, a quick amount of time, and then get people up to speed on the job in quick time again, because being quick is the mantra today. So technology is big lever, is a big tool. Community practice, where you give the freedom to people where they can create their own content, create a healthy competitive environment where people can come together and in real time create content and contribute to that, and also get people to solve problems. Thereby, they not only learn how to solve problems, they also create a new body of knowledge, which becomes practice for others to kind of pick up that. The most important thing, which will ensure productivity and will ensure that we do not repeat mistakes, is every time we complete a project or an assignment or an initiative, we go back and fundamentally ask ourselves and document the answers to 4 questions. What we wanted to do, what we actually did, what was the gap, how can we ensure that we do it well next time. If this is documented at the end of every project, every initiative, it is captured, documented, available and accessible to people who want to run similar projects and programs and initiatives, it will actually prevent them from repeating the mistakes that you made, which will drive productivity of learning. What we wanted to do, what we actually did, what was the gap, how can we ensure that in future we do it better. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here. The recordings will be shared tomorrow. Please visit springpeople.com for upcoming webinars, conclaves. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.